Good evening, everyone. Buenas tardes a todos. Welcome to the Parent University. We welcome you to another session to offer our families very important information. We have Jennifer Efland, who's here today, and I will have her introduce herself in a minute. Again, our topic this evening is My Child is a Multilingual Learner. How can I support them? Para los padres que no están escuchando y necesitan traducción a español, gracias por asistir a nuestra Universidad para Padres. Esta noche el tema es, mi hijo es un estudiante multilingüe, ¿cómo puedo apoyarlo? Okay, I will pass it on to Jennifer now to go ahead and introduce herself, but also to share now our presentation for this evening.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Efland. I'm the Executive Director of Multilingual Learners for the district, and I was a former Multilingual Learner student in Providence Public Schools. So it's really a pleasure to be here with you tonight and to help answer any questions that you have about supporting your students, your children. Give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm also going to share this link with you so that all of the information that I share is available to you. I'll make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so today we are going to talk about how your child was identified as a multilingual learner. We're going to briefly go over the different programs that we have in the district for multilingual learners. We will talk about the access test, which is a test that's coming up that all of our multilingual learners will take. And then supports at home that you can do at home to help your child learn English. Even if you may not know English yourself, there's lots of ways that you can help support your children. And then I want to make sure that I also leave room to answer any questions that you may have. I get this question often: why is my child considered a multilingual learner? Maybe you speak mostly English at home, or maybe your child speaks mostly English at home, and really they only listen to Spanish or another language. So this does happen sometimes. Being a multilingual learner doesn't mean necessarily that your child speaks only another language. The way that we identify students to see if they are multilingual learners is through a home language survey. So when you first enrolled your child in Providence Public Schools, or in really any district in the United States of America, legally, there is a form that families have to fill out called a home language survey. And this is where we ask several questions so that we can learn more about the languages that are spoken at home and the languages that your child is exposed to. So many of our Providence students either speak other languages at home or are exposed to and listen to other languages with their family members at home. And so if your child speaks another language or is exposed to another language at home, then we administer an assessment when they first start school. This is an assessment that a company called WIDA creates, and it's an assessment that's used almost in all of the states here, colored in blue. So it's an assessment used across the country. And that assessment measures their English language proficiency. So the WIDA assessment is used for students entering kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. And as I said before, it's measuring listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And it's measuring whether students are on grade level in those 4 domains. Oftentimes, we may see a child who can speak English very well, can listen and understand English very well, but it may be that their reading and their writing might not be on grade level in English. And this is a test that also gets a little bit more complicated and more complex as the students are in higher grade levels, because it is measuring their grade level proficiency. So depending on how your child may have done on this assessment, students can score between a 1 all the way to a 6. And I'm going to go to the next slide so you see the Spanish. If a child earns less than a 5 on this assessment, then we do identify them as a student who has limited English proficiency, again, in either reading, writing, listening, or speaking, that does qualify to receive extra support in school to develop their English language. And when you registered your child, you should have been given an option. In our district, we have different programs for multilingual learners. In our bilingual programs, we are developing Spanish and English literacy and oracy. We want our students to graduate being fully bilingual in Spanish and English. And our ESL programs, really the goal of those programs is that students acquire English. And so the focus is that they really are focusing on reading, writing, listening, speaking academic English so that they can become on grade level. When I share this slide deck with you, you can click if you want to learn more about these programs. On this link, there's an English, and then other languages are here so that you can see in more detail the programs that we offer and a description of how these programs support multilingual learners and the schools where we have these programs. Okay. Now, the access test, as I mentioned, is a test that we give every multilingual learner in the state of Rhode Island and in many other states in the country. Your child's school will administer the access test sometime between January 9th and March 3rd. So as this test is coming up, we definitely want to make sure that our students are prepared to take this test. It is a state test that again will measure how are they doing in listening, speaking, reading, and writing on grade level. And again, this test is very similar to the test that they took when they first enrolled in the district. It's measuring to see if they're growing in their English language proficiency at the right grade level. And we know, again, many students might speak English very well. They might listen and understand what you're telling them in English. But when they're reading and writing, that's where we see that students do struggle more with being proficient at their grade level. Our goal for all students when they take access, again, the scores will be between a 1 all the way to a 6. Our goal is that they get a 4.8. If they earn a 4.8 on access, that means that they are no longer needing this extra help at school and extra support with their English language development. And some students at the bottom, you'll see a different scale. Some students who have an IEP and have an alternate assessment in their IEP, they don't take the regular access test, they take an alternate version of access. And if you have a child who takes this alternate version, the goal for those students is a score of a P2 for 2 consecutive years. So it's really our school's goal to help support your children so that when they take this test, maybe when they started with us, they received a 1 overall in their English language development. And we want to see that every year they're growing so they can get to their goal of at least a 4.8 on this exam. because that will show that they're reading, they're writing, listening, and speaking academic English on grade level. Now, in order to prepare for this test, it's important to understand what it's actually going to look like, what it's going to measure. So some schools may do the 4 different parts of the test on 4 different days. Some schools might combine the different parts into one day. It depends on your child and their age. But when they're taking the listening part of the test, students will be using headphones on a computer, and they will listen to questions. They'll have an opportunity to listen to test items only one time. So questions are not repeated. They have to be really attentively listening to the questions very carefully. Questions are really only repeated if a student has an IEP and it's part of their IEP to be able to repeat questions. For most students, they have to listen carefully one time, listen to the question, and then they have to choose the correct answer through multiple choice options. For the speaking part, students again will be using a computer, and they will be asked a question that they will be asked one time, and then using a microphone on their headset, they will be able to respond. I always tell students, and if you have the opportunity, please talk to your child when this test is coming up. A lot of kids, they will start talking immediately, but we always encourage students, listen to the question first, and then think about what you want to answer. Students have the time. If they want, they can even write out what they want to say. And when they're ready to respond, they can record and answer their question fully. If they have time to plan, and that's something I encourage students to do, that planning will help them have a stronger response when they record their answer. Also, something else that I encourage students to do during this test is they should not worry about answering a question wrong. In the speaking section, we just want to know how they're using English. And so as much as they can speak as possible, the better. Sometimes, you might ask a student a question and their response is just one word. And that's not going to help show and demonstrate that they really know how to use the English language using complete sentences and a lot of details in their responses. In the reading section of the test, students will be asked to read grade level texts in English. So after reading, they will be able to respond to multiple choice questions. And the text is always going to be there. Something that you can encourage your child to do is when they're taking this test, or really any test, any work at school, is to go back to the text, go back to what they read to make sure that they're answering correctly. They shouldn't try to guess what the answers may be. If they go back and reread and try to find the answers are usually right in the text. This is a part of the test that takes stamina because they're reading texts that are on grade level. It can take an hour or more of reading and responding to questions. So students do need to have stamina to be able to sit through this exam and do well. So again, something you can do is to help encourage as much reading at home so they can build that stamina for this type of assessment. The writing portion of the test allows students to write sometimes 2 or 3 passages. So they will be given a prompt or a question. Usually there's images and visuals that they will see that can help support them in their writing. And there's usually also a text box, like this text box at the top of this slide, where they will be given keywords that they can use in their writing. And so we always encourage our students to use the box of words, because those are going to be important words that we want them to include in their writing. And of course, when they're done writing, to go back and read what they write, so that they can make sure that it makes sense from someone else who may be reading it. Now that you know the 4 different parts of this test that your child will take, like I said before, there's many, many ways that you can help them at home. So sometimes I know that I work with families where the parents may not speak English. And so they may ask me, how can I help my child if I don't speak English? How can I help them develop English? And the thing that I tell the most often is that it doesn't matter if you don't speak English yourself. You being able to show your children that you think their education is important and valuable, that's supporting your children. I was a former multilingual learner in our district, and my parents didn't speak English, but they always stressed the importance of an education. And even though they couldn't help me with my homework or my readings, they always, always, always stressed the importance of my education and reminded me, to do my work, to try my best. And that has always been such a great support. So don't feel like you can't support your child. You absolutely can. So again, definitely share with your child how important education is and how important homework is if they have homework assignments. Set a regular time for homework for them after school. Ideally, they should have a space where they can be organized with their work so they can complete homework at home. You can pick a place in your home where there's less distractions. Show that you're interested about the things that they may be learning about. Ask questions about the things that they're reading and that they're learning in their different content areas. Even though you may not speak English, you can still check to make sure that they're completing their work and talk about their assignments. Nowadays, we have a lot of students who have exposure to a lot of media, TV, video games, and you want to try to monitor their usage of that so they can spend less time on the media and more time really focusing on their schoolwork. We do know that sometimes students who are new to English, it can be very frustrating. So we want to always encourage praise and really highlight the good things that they're doing, the great effort that they're showing. We encourage you as well to not shy away from talking to their teachers. Again, if you may not know how to speak English, do not hesitate. You can still call the school, contact their teachers. In our district, we have interpretation and translation services 24/7. Every school has access to interpreters every single day of the year at any time. So do not hesitate to reach out and ask for an interpreter when you want to speak to someone at your child's school. And if you have concerns, raise those concerns to your child's teachers. The other thing that I want to share is it's so important. Like I said before, oftentimes students acquire listening and speaking quickly, but it's the reading and the writing that often holds them back from being able to pass this access test. So make sure that your child reads every night. And if you have books at home, even if they're not books in English, if they're reading in Spanish, that's going to help them in English. It sounds strange, but even if you're reading in Spanish, that's going to help them learn English. Because reading is more than just reading words off a page. Reading is comprehending and understanding what you're reading about. And so if you read something in Spanish at your home, you can talk about those things in Spanish and really help your child understand the meaning behind what they're reading.
Jennifer, I'm
yes.
sorry, before you move on, I just want to remind families that might have jumped on the Zoom a little bit later after you started. So just to remind them about the Q&A and also how to access the Spanish interpretation. So again, families, if you have any questions or comments, you can see at the very bottom of your screen the Q&A. So once you press that, then there will be a screen there that you can go ahead and just enter a comment or question. We will read it out loud. Jennifer will go ahead and respond. Also, if you need this information in Spanish, I will translate this in Spanish so that families that need interpretation, we do have an interpreter right now. So that way they understand that they do have access to interpretation live right now. Para las familias que están en nuestra llamada aquí, que ustedes tal vez entraron al Zoom un poquito después que Jennifer hizo su presentación, todavía ella tiene un poco más de hablar, pero si tienen alguna pregunta o comentario, pueden mirar hacia abajo de su pantalla donde ven las letras Q y A. Cuando ustedes presionan el Q y A, ustedes entonces pueden entrar alguna pregunta o un comentario para que Jennifer le pueda responder la pregunta. Pero también para acceder a esta información en español, lo ven en la pantalla que están en español con las letras rojas, pero también tenemos un intérprete que usted puede acceder, el globo que está abajo de la pantalla, puede presionar el globo y entonces van a poder ver la opción en español, las palabras Spanish, para que puedan escuchar la presentación de Jennifer en español ahora mismo, hasta el final de la presentación. Cualquier pregunta que tengan, también tienen la opción de elegir Raise Hand, que es la mano que ven abajo. Pueden presionar esto, nosotros entonces lo vemos de nuestra parte y así entonces le vamos a pedir que prendan su micrófono para entonces poder escuchar su pregunta en vivo. Y lo pueden hacer de nuevo en inglés o español. Gracias.
Thank you for that reminder. I did see that someone had a question in the Q&A. Why don't the schools start teaching other languages since kindergarten? That's a great question. We do want to teach our multilingual learners and even students who don't speak other languages how to become multilingual and acquire more than just one language. So we do have dual language programs in 6 elementary schools and 1 middle school. And we are always wanting more and more families to sign up for those programs because we believe strongly that our children will only benefit from knowing more than one language. As children and even as adults in their career, it's so important to maintain your bilingualism or to become bilingual if they're not already bilingual. So if you want to learn more about our dual language and bilingual programs, I'm happy to stay after to talk to you about where those programs are if you're interested in enrolling your child in one of those programs. But if you are a multilingual learner and you do have multilingual text at home, so even if you're not reading in English, we do stress how important it is to read and to talk about the readings with your children in your native language. So you can ask children, about the texts that they're reading, the characters, why they might act a certain way. If you ask them a question, ask them to go back to the text that they're reading to show you where the answer may be, so that they get used to using that text to collect evidence for how they're responding. Sometimes students may read books that are informational, and so they might be learning a lot of new facts, and you can ask them questions about those topics and perhaps make connections to other texts that they may be reading or other books. Because again, writing seems to be in our district more challenging than the oral, just listening and speaking English. It's so important that our kids also have practice and opportunities with writing their ideas and their thinking. So I encourage you to encourage your child to keep a journal so that they can practice writing daily. Okay, now the test window for access is a long window. It can happen anytime between January, February, or the beginning of March. So the exact dates, your school will let your child know. They will let you know when they will be taking this test. So if you get a letter from the school or a notice that your child is going to take access in the next few days or that week, you want to make sure this is a long test, that they go to bed early, that they have breakfast that morning. That's going to help them be ready to take this test. And, remind them to try their best. There are 4 sections, so they will be taking 4 different sections. And if they need a break, it's always okay to ask your teacher that might need a break if they feel like the test is very long. They shouldn't rush through the test. Because it is a longer test, we do see that sometimes students rush through it, but really encourage your child to take their time to check their work. This is not a timed test, so they can take as much time as they need to complete and check their work. When they're reading, remind them to go back and look to make sure that they have evidence for their answers. And then again, when they're writing, to use those word banks that are provided to help support them in their writing. And then one last reminder, sometimes our students, they might speak English very well at home and with their friends, but when they take this test, they get really shy and they, might not be familiar with using a microphone where their voice gets recorded. So just try to remind them it's okay. They don't have to be nervous or shy. This is just a test to see how they're using English. So that, to try to express their thinking with as much detail as possible when they're taking that speaking portion. Now, it's also important to know that this is just one test of many other state tests that our students take. Usually at the end of the year, our students take other state assessments. So in the elementary grades, it's the RICAS. In the secondary grades, we see like the SAT or assessments that are also longer state assessments. Now, as a multilingual learner, our students have the right to have extra time. We know that English may not be their first language. And so if your child is a multilingual learner and they're going to take a test soon, they can get extra time. That's something you can ask for that they should be able to get. Also, when they're writing, oftentimes there are tests that allow our multilingual learners to use a graphic organizer. It's almost like a planning paper to help them plan their thoughts before they start writing. And also, it's important for them to, if it's a brand new student who just came to the country, they might not understand very much English. It's important for you to know and for them to know that they can get the directions of the test translated. And in some instances, some tests can be given in Spanish. So a math test, for example, is a test that we're not measuring if a student knows English. We're measuring to see if they know math. And so math assessments can be translated for students if that's something that can help them show what they know in math. So these are just some of the supports. Again, not necessarily related to access, but other assessments that your child may be getting where you can advocate for and make sure that they're getting these supports. Okay, I shared a lot of information, but now I really am just inviting you to ask questions if you have any questions about what I've shared about the access test that's coming up, or any other questions about how to support your multilingual learner student.
Jennifer, we have either a comment or question here. Do you see it?
Yes, I see a comment about a parent who says that they speak to their child about the importance of knowing multiple languages. And that's wonderful. That's great because we want our kids to know multiple languages. And at home, if the child is reading an English book, then they will then ask questions in Spanish and the child will be able to answer in Spanish. And that's great. That's wonderful because the student is able to read something in English and then they can translate for their parent and show them that they understand the text in Spanish. That's great.
Jennifer, there's another question.
Yeah, so one parent wants to know more about the programs where the children can become bilingual. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to share this slide deck. So give me 1 second. I'm going to put this presentation on the chat. So if I put it in the chat, Janet, will people have access to it?
Yes.
Okay.
So the important thing there is that for families, in order to have access, you have to click on the link as soon as Jennifer enters it in the chat. And then once we end our presentation, just make sure not to close it, right? You need to save it on your computer if you want to revisit it, if not now to review it, but you might want to review it later on. Just try to make sure to remind yourself to save it in your computer.
I just put the link in the chat. So if you want to click on that link, it'll give you access to the presentation. I'm going to go to slide 12. Slide 12 is the slide that goes over the programs that we have in the district. And someone was asking about the bilingual programs or the dual language. So I am going to click on this link at the bottom. It's an English link. If you click on the second link, it'll give you access to the programs in many other languages. So if you need those languages, you can get those translations. I'm going to click on English for now, just to show you what that program description looks like. So we have bilingual programs on the left and two-way dual language programs on the right. Both programs help students learn both English and Spanish. And the schools that offer these programs are listed right here. So if you want your child to be in this type of program where they're learning both languages, reading, writing, listening, speaking every day in both languages, these are the schools where you would want to request for them to attend a program at those schools. So if your child doesn't go to these schools right now, we can work with the registration center to change your child's school. Or if you know anyone in your community who's about to enroll a kindergarten student, we always encourage them to attend these schools that offer our dual language and our bilingual programs. And if you have a fifth grader right now, Gilbert Stewart is our middle school that offers dual language. So when they get a choice as to what middle school to attend, that would be the school that you would want them to choose so they can go to the dual language program at that school. I see a comment from a parent that says that at home, they don't speak English and their children are just learning English for the first time. And it is very difficult. I do understand that. I remember coming as a student who didn't know English. Usually it does take students between 5 or 6 or 7 years to pass this access test. So if it's their first year in the United States, really using English for the first time, they might get a 1 on this test. From 1 to 6, a 1 means that they're just beginning to learn English. let me go back to this scale. So they're just entering. And usually we want to see that every year they're making growth. So they might go from a 1 to a 2, 3, 4, and really reach 5 in 5 years. And that's typical. It does take a lot of patience. Being a multilingual learner really teaches you a lot of skills. Learning another language can be very difficult, but it's something that, our students are definitely going to benefit from being multilingual learner, as I said before. I do have a question from another parent. So even if your child doesn't speak Spanish, they can still attend our dual language programs. We want them to attend. In our dual language programs, we have classes where the students, half of the students are Spanish speakers and they're learning English, and the other half are English speakers that want to learn Spanish. So the students learn from each other. They're each learning a new language. It might be Spanish or it might be English that they're learning. Oh, it seems like you can't access the link. So I'm going to go back and just make sure that this is something anyone can view. It says anyone with the link should be able to view. So I'm going to copy the link again, and hopefully you can see it. I'm hearing from another parent that at first their children did not know another language outside of just their native language, Spanish, and now they are bilingual, and they do know both languages, and that's wonderful. Like I said, that's just such a gift that you could give your children, having them be fully bilingual and biliterate. They'll be able to access so many more opportunities than if they just knew one language. But it does take time. It does take about 5 years or so for a student to fully master English on grade level. One thing I didn't share that I always like to share with families, for those who are still on, is on our website. We want to make sure that you are involved in your child's education. So when you click on our website, let me see if I can share the Providence School website. All the information that's on the website for Providence Public Schools is available in multiple languages. So we have a translate feature right here, where if you want the website to be translated, I'm going to hit Spanish. Then all the information is in Spanish. So you can learn more about the different departments. My department is Estudiantes Multilingües, and so I can click on that and learn more about, if I'm a parent of multilingual learners, there's a lot of resources there. If I want to know who the team is that supports multilingual learners, this is me, and my team is listed here, and all of our contact information is also on this website. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that. In case you want to share that with other families, our entire website can be translated into many different languages.
Jennifer, we have someone who has raised their hand. So let's see. Okay. Okay, so this person, your name does not appear, but a number is what's appearing. So if you can unmute your name, unmute your, there you go.
Hello.
Yep, we can hear you.
Sí. Hello.
Sí. Haga su pregunta o si tiene algún comentario. No se escucha.
Ok,
No, no.
yo quisiera saber, yo tengo un sobrino mío que va a venir en febrero. ¿Se puede apuntar en ese programa de multilingüe?
Sí, absolutamente. Cuando ese niño venga al distrito,
I don't know why we don't.
va a tener,
Si puede desactivar su micrófono mientras contestamos. Ok. Go ahead, Jennifer.
claro, a
Jennifer, if you
cualquier
can
tiempo del
translate
año.
the question first and then respond, please.
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. This is a question regarding a student that is coming to Providence sometime, I
In
think
February?
in winter, in February, and whether they can sign up for these programs. And I'm going to answer in Spanish if that's okay for the parent. Sí, a cualquier punto del año, todos los días, la oficina de la registración está abierta y los niños pueden registrarse. Cuando se registran, las familias tienen que responder a estas preguntas y si indican las familias que hablan otro idioma como español en el hogar, entonces, claro, le dan un examen al niño que se llama el examen de WIDA. Y dependiendo en cómo hace el estudiante, normalmente si los estudiantes están comenzando a aprender inglés por primera vez, reciben un puntaje de 1. Es de 1 a 6, pero cualquier niño que recibe menos de 5 puntos en este examen, sí le ofrecemos a esas familias servicios para ayudarles con el inglés. Y los programas que tenemos pueden ser programas bilingüe, cuando están aprendiendo los dos idiomas, español e inglés al mismo tiempo, o pueden elegir un programa que es de ESL, que es solamente soportes y ayuda con aprender el inglés como segundo idioma. Pero tenemos programas en todas las escuelas. Entonces, cualquier escuela que eligen va a tener un programa para apoyarle con soportes para aprender inglés.
¿Tiene otra pregunta? ¿Puede activar su micrófono de nuevo?
Perdón, no importa la edad, porque él está en sexto grado allá en República Dominicana. Y no sé si en ese tiempo puede que él lo capte o algo por el estilo, o ustedes puedan ayudarle.
¿En qué grado entra? Oh, let me ask the question in English. This parent,
I'm sorry. Gracias. Go ahead,
the
Jennifer.
parent is asking, this is a student who's coming in at the secondary grade level, and he's wondering if we can still support them. Y sí, no importa qué grado el estudiante entra, a veces tenemos estudiantes que están entrando que tienen 18 años y es la primera vez que están aprendiendo inglés. Entonces, no importa si no han tenido educación en su país o si sí han asistido a escuela y solamente han asistido en español. No importa qué tipo de servicio o educación han tenido en el pasado, los aceptamos en el distrito y le damos un programa que sea adecuado para ellos. Entonces, hay programas que tenemos que le llamamos ESL para recién llegados. Ese programa específicamente es para niños que vienen, que acaban de venir a los Estados Unidos, nunca han aprendido inglés antes y en todos los grados tenemos este programa. Entonces, como le dije, no importa si han tenido escuela o no, si no han hablado inglés antes, sí tenemos este tipo de programa en cada escuela para apoyarlos.
Ok, muchas gracias. Okay, then we have someone else who would like to ask their question live. La persona ahora mismo con el nombre La Bebé, Siga. ¿Tiene alguna pregunta, un comentario? ¿No lo escuchamos? Ok, ¿lo podemos escuchar ahora? ¿Quiere? ¿Tiene algún comentario? No se escucha. Okay. If anyone else has a question, I think we have another question in the Q&A.
Yes, it was to share the link to the presentation again. So I just shared it again in the chat.
Okay, and I just want to clarify, if you do not have access to the chat right now, I'm not sure why, because it is available, if it's available for us right now. So what I'll do is I'll make sure to email the link. As you all know, as you came into the Zoom, it did ask you for your information, and so we do have your email. But please let us know if the link is working for you. Oh,
I see a question in the Q&A. It's in Spanish. Is it okay if I'm going to say the question in English and then I'm going to answer in Spanish?
Yes.
This is a parent who is asking about their 8-year-old child who has a hard time reading with her homework. And so the parent is saying that she's reading aloud to her, and that makes it easier for her, and should she be worried? Estoy respondiendo a la pregunta de ayudando a su hija, que usted le lee a ella porque eso se le hace un poco más fácil para ella. Si este es el primer año o es recién llegada a los Estados Unidos o está aprendiendo inglés por primera vez, no se debe de preocupar si ella todavía no puede leer independientemente. Como le dije antes, a veces los niños le tardan como 5 o más años para verdaderamente aprender a leer y escribir al nivel apropiado para su grado. Si usted le lee a ella y eso le está ayudando, siga haciéndolo. Es mejor poder discutir y responder a las preguntas y hablar de esas preguntas junta con ella para que ella esté entendiendo los conceptos que está leyendo. Pero también es importante, si usted puede, haga que ella lea un poco también cada día. Entonces así pueden tomar turnos para que ella también practique leyendo y también usted le puede leer a ella. Eso es muy bueno, poder leer a los niños. Yo le leo a mis niños todas las noches porque es importante que ellos también escuchen la lectura para que puedan hablar de lo que están leyendo. Entonces, siga leyéndole a ella, eso es muy importante y lo debe de seguir haciendo.
Jennifer, folks are saying that they can see the link, but they don't have access to it. Can you enter it again?
Yeah, it says the chat is now active, but the link is not showing. So I am going to share the link again.
If you can share it in the chat, but also in the response to the Q&A, just to see if that way maybe they'll have the access.
I'm going to share to everyone right now. I think before I was only sharing to the panelists. That's why.
Yes.
I'm sorry, that was my fault. So now you should have it.
There you go. This question here you just answered, correct? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
One thing I want to share, and I forgot to share this, is that every single school in the district has at least 2 coaches who specifically support multilingual learners. So every school has a coach who supports with math instruction and a coach that supports with reading instruction. And both of those coaches attend meetings with the Office of Multilingual Learners and attend trainings with us. So they have information about the access test. They have information, about any questions that you may have. You don't necessarily have to call me. You can contact the MLL office, but know that if you go to your child's school or if you contact their teacher, there is someone at every building who can help answer questions about how to support them with learning English. If it's English as a second language that they're learning, or about the different programs that we offer, ESL and bilingual. So do not hesitate to reach out to them. And like I said, again, I can't stress enough that it is your right to receive interpretation and translation services. So never shy away from asking to have an interpreter if you need an interpreter.
So Jennifer, we have two raised hands here, okay?
Yep.
Okay, Glenda. Glenda, si puede desactivar, muy bien.
Sí, buenas noches. Yo tengo una pregunta. Acabo de oír que dice que los niños que acaban de llegar de otro país, que no han oído hablar inglés, pueden apuntarse para ESL. ¿Es solo para ellos?
Sí,
o
claro.
también?
Cualquier estudiante que se registra. Oh, I'm sorry, Janet. I'm going to ask the question in English. Voy a repetir su respuesta, su pregunta en inglés. Perdón. This parent is wondering if they can register a child who has not ever learned English into ESL. And the answer is yes. Cuando nosotros estamos registrando a un estudiante nuevo, aunque sea recién llegado a los Estados Unidos o por la primera vez está aprendiendo inglés, siempre le ofrecemos a esas familias la opción de los programas que están disponibles para ellos. Y todos los niños en los grados de kinder hasta séptimo grado tienen la opción de programas bilingües o programas de ESL. Y ahorita los grados mayores, como del 8 hasta el 12, solamente tenemos ESL. Pero la meta es que estamos creciendo los programas bilingües para que en el futuro tengamos esos programas desde kinder hasta el grado 12. Pero sí, eso es algo que le ofrecemos a todas las familias, especialmente si son recién llegados y están aprendiendo inglés por primera vez. Queremos que ellos reciban esos soportes. Y todas las escuelas ofrecen esos programas de ESL.
Tengo otra pregunta, disculpe.
Sí.
Y los niños que nacen aquí, ¿ellos están para también estar en ESL o es decisión del padre? ¿O es porque tiene que estar en ESL en la escuela?
Voy a repetir su pregunta en inglés. This is a question about a student that might be born in the United States. Do they have the option of attending an ESL program? Is that an option given to families? Todo depende en el examen que el estudiante toma cuando primera vez está registrando en el distrito. Entonces, si hay un estudiante que nació en los Estados Unidos, pero la familia ha indicado que hablan otro idioma en el hogar, todavía a esos estudiantes, aunque han nacido aquí y tal vez saben inglés, sí le damos el examen y medimos cómo están haciendo en la lectura, el hablar, la lectura y la escritura. Y si ellos no reciben un puntaje de por lo menos 5 puntos y sí califican para recibir soporte adicional en la escuela. Entonces, aunque hayan nacido aquí en los Estados Unidos, si miramos que no están leyendo, no están escribiendo al nivel apropiado para su grado, le ofrecemos esos programas. Pero cada programa es un poco diferente. Le voy a explicar que el ESL, tenemos un ESL que es específicamente para estudiantes recién llegados. Esos son estudiantes que han estado aquí en los Estados Unidos menos de 2 años y son principiantes al idioma inglés. Por la mayor parte, los estudiantes están en un programa que se llama ESL en entorno integrado. Lo que quiere decir esto es que todavía están recibiendo soportes de ESL, pero las clases están mixtas con niños que reciben soportes de ESL y niños que son estudiantes como regular, que ya saben el inglés. Entonces, están mezclados en las clases, pero los maestros tienen entrenamiento de cómo apoyarles a mejorar su inglés. Y estos niños, aunque hayan nacido en los Estados Unidos, reciben una clase adicional de soporte y de ayuda para mejorar en el idioma de inglés. Otra vez, específicamente, muchas veces es la escritura y la lectura que necesitan más soporte.
Muchas gracias,
Entonces,
Glenda.
sí pueden recibir esos programas aunque hayan nacido en los Estados Unidos. Pero nada es forzado. Las familias siempre tienen la opción de elegir el programa que quieren para sus hijos. Y si no quieren programa, también tienen el derecho de decir, no, gracias, no quiero este programa para mis estudiantes, quiero que estén en clases regulares y eso también está bien.
Gracias, Glenda.
Gracias.
Jennifer, I wanted to ask you a question on behalf of many families that often share this comment or understanding. Oftentimes families that have children or that have children, yes, that have been enrolled in one of our programs of ELL programs are confused, especially when they feel that their child already knows English, right? So the family will say, but he already knows English. I don't understand why they're being enrolled in this program, even though you just said, but you said it in Spanish, Jennifer, these programs are not forced, right? So parents have the right to decline. Is that the way you would say this?
Absolutely.
So if you can go into that a little bit in English and then again, repeat it in Spanish, because and just more so understanding that when a parent feels that their child knows English because they hear them conversating in English, correct? Does that really say that they know English?
Correct. Yes, I get that question often as well. So many families will tell me that their children know English. They speak English at home. They speak English with their friends. That's the language they know well. And sometimes they might not speak Spanish at home or another language. They only speak English at home with their friends, with their family. And maybe in some instances, it was just like grandma who spoke Spanish, and it was just a little bit of Spanish, but the child mostly speaks English. The test that we give the students is not only measuring their listening comprehension and their speaking comprehension. That's why I always mention that this test is not, it's listening, speaking, but it also includes reading and writing. And it's to measure if they're on grade level. So if I am in 8th grade, I'm going to be asked to listen and to speak like an 8th grader is expected to listen and to speak. So we're not expecting a one-word answer. We're expecting them to speak like a presentation, to have very academic English to share their thoughts and their thinking. And when we're giving them the reading and the writing test, it's expecting them to read long passages that are allowing kids to really understand the complexities that come as an 8th grader. What do we expect 8th graders to understand when they're reading? And how do we expect an 8th grader to write paragraphs and essays like? So if they get less than a 5 on this test, that means that they're just not on grade level yet. They're not showing us that they're demonstrating their grade level proficiency. And so it doesn't mean they don't know English. They might know English, but academic English is different than the English that they might be using to communicate about, sports or their interests. Academic English is reading a novel and being able to express how the characters might have conflict and resolution with one another, or reading about a topic like the equator and how the sun, orbits around the earth, and being able to explain, scientific processes. So I hear that a lot. And yes, your child may know English, but we're measuring if they know academic English on grade level in all 4 domains. And so for the families that tell me that their child learns English, I explain this to them. We want to support them so that we can help them develop reading and writing skills to really show that they're proficient on grade level. But we cannot force any family to accept this extra help that we give in schools. So it is their right to say, I don't want my child to receive any ESL support. And that is a conversation that should be happening at the registration center. So when your child first took this test, that's the option that you should have been given. You were probably recommended that your child take an ESL class, or that they get this extra support. But you should have also been given the right and the option to say, no, thank you. I don't want any extra help for my child. But we give access this test every year in January and February. And those results usually come back in June. So in June, we'll be sending out letters again to say how your child is doing. And if your child does not score at least a 5 or a 6, then this letter will say your child is going to continue receiving ESL services, or they will continue receiving, bilingual dual language services. And in that letter, you're also given the option to say, no, thank you. I don't want to receive these services for my child next year. And there's usually the contact of your child's school, because if you don't want to receive these services, you can call your school and tell them, I don't want to receive these services for my child. That's always an option at any time you can call if you don't agree with this extra support. But we are basing the extra support off of this test and how they do on this test. So that's something that, someone at the school can review. They can pull up your child's records and see how they have been doing on this test every year to see, have they been making growth, or have they been, maybe there's a domain, maybe it's just reading that's the difficult part for them, or maybe it's just writing.
Jennifer, so are you able to, so for that parent that chooses to decline the service, can you share whether or not every time a parent decides to decline, what is the result or the outcome of that, or the consequence, if the child then is assigned, let's say, to regular education? Do we see that oftentimes that decision will show that the child does okay, or has to return to an ELL program? So just so that parents have an understanding that when you decline, something might happen, but is it good or bad? Is it all the time? Does it get better? What does that look like?
So when a parent decides to, we call it waive the services, it is a decision that they make for one academic year. So it's only valid for 1 year. when they take access again, and they still show us that they need this extra help, we will offer the services again. Every year, we want to see how the child is doing, because if the family says, I don't want to receive this extra help for my child, but we see that on the test, they're getting worse, then we want to have that conversation again each year to make sure that you as the parent are making the best decision for your child with the information that we have on how they're doing. But if you do decide to waive, what that means is that your child will not receive an extra class every day that we call English language development. So all of our multilingual learners, even if they're in dual language or if they're in ESL, one period every single day is dedicated to get extra help in English language development. And if you decide to waive the services, that means they won't take that class. So instead, if they're in middle school or high school, they might take another elective, or they might take an intervention class for math if they need extra help in math. But again, it's just for 1 year. We will not give them services, but when they take access again, if they're not going to score a 5, then we will contact you again, and you will have to make that decision again for the following year if you want to continue to waive, or if now you're saying, okay, I do want to accept services because maybe they're not making growth on the test.
Okay. I just have one more question, just for clarification. The test that you referred to, which is access, that should be happening very soon. And is it for all grade levels from K to 12?
It is, yes. Every single multilingual learner takes the test from kindergarten to 12th grade. And even when a family chooses to waive and they don't want their children to be in any ESL program or bilingual program, they still take this test. Legally, we have to see and monitor how our multilingual learners are doing. So it is coming up sometime between January, February, or the beginning of March. Your child will take this test. And like I said, some schools, they might do it over 4 days, each day taking a different part of the test. And some schools, if they're older students, they might take multiple sections in 1 day. But they will likely know that this test is coming. Their school will communicate when their specific date will be.
Okay, so we're running out of time. I think I would like for you, Jennifer, as you share with us your final thoughts and comments before you exit the Zoom. If you can just share, if a parent leaves our Zoom this evening, has some questions afterwards about program, about progress, or not seeing a lot of it, who should parents have a conversation with, and how soon should that be happening, especially if they have concerns now? Well, you're mute.
If a family has a concern, the best place to go is contact their child's teacher or the administrator, someone at their school. They always can contact me or someone in my office, but we will likely connect them to the right person at their school to have those conversations. I am going to go back to the website and just put a link. So this page on our website has the information of everyone in my office. So our email and our phone numbers are there. And there's a lot of people who support in my department. Some of them support middle schools, some elementary schools. So they can contact any one of us here. And again, we can connect with the school to make sure that they get the right support. But families can always contact their school directly as well and say they have questions or concerns about their multilingual learner. I'm going to put this on the chat so people have access to it as well.
Great. And parent-teacher conferences just finished right? We just had them. There's opportunity for parents to have conferences with their child's teacher at any time during the school year. So again, we're encouraging families definitely to do this, maximize that opportunity if you do have any questions or concerns. Okay. All right, Jennifer. Well, thank you so much for this great information. I'm hopeful that the link that Jennifer shared earlier, that if you know of any parent that planned to attend tonight's Zoom, but was unable to join us, if you can please share that information, or again, be on the lookout for future topics and information regarding our families that have children in the English language learner programs. And again, please make sure to reach out to any of your school staff that you might have questions regarding this program. And Jennifer, if there's anything else, please share it. And then you can go on your way, because we're going to move on for some feedback and also a short raffle that we have.
No, just thank you for your time, and just thank you for continuing to stress how important it is to be multilingual. It's definitely an asset. So thank you for encouraging that at home.
All righty. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and have a good evening. And again, for anyone who might have a question or concern, and you just need a little bit of guidance, our office is here to help. So please make sure that you reach out to us. You can always call our office 401-456-0686.